Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this next video lesson. We are going to create the game called Blackout. And the Blackout game works like this. If you click a particular chip, or if you click a button, the adjacent button is swapped from one color to another color. And so why don't I go ahead and design this for you so we can get started. So we'll go to the toolbox and we're going to drag and drop a button. Now normally I have you drag a button, a label, and a text box. But in this case, we're just going to start off with a button. I want that button to be approximately 100 by 100 pixels. And you can see down here I can get the size as I'm moving this back and forth. But let me make this thing exactly 100 by 100. So what I'm going to do is open up the Properties panel. You'll notice that under the Size property, I have a width and a height. And this is the width and the height in pixels. So let me double click this, type 100. And also type 100 here for both the width and the height. And so this is what I get over here. Now that I have a button that is both 100 by 100 in terms of pixels, let me get rid of the text. So I can go over here and just get rid of that text so there's nothing over here. I'm going to move this button to the upper left-hand corner over here. And you can see the guidelines kind of help me define where that upper left-hand corner is. And I don't want this color. I want it to be either red or white. So what I'll do is go to the back color. The back color indicates the color of this button. And you can see here that it's selected, the control is selected. If I click this drop down and if I select Web and then Custom, I don't have to actually go to Web. I'm just showing you all the different tabs that are available. But if I go to Custom, you'll see the red paint chip. So you'll select back color, click the drop down, select the custom tab, and then select the red paint chip. When you do that, now you can see this has a red background. So back color is the way to set the background color. In this case, I'm going to choose between red and white as my various options. Okay. So now I'm going to take this button and I'll copy and paste it. So let me select this guy, Control C, Control V, and I can move this right here. Now, if you did not want this space in between, then you could just use your arrow buttons, like for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you can see that they're really, really close. But I'm okay with the space, so I'm just going to do this. I'll let the guidelines help me to establish the space right there. Let me go ahead and copy and paste again. So I have my 3 buttons. Now I want a total of 3 rows, so I will select this entire row like this. I'm going to select this entire row by touching these 3 buttons, and then Control C, Control V, I'll move this into position, and then Control V, move this into position. And now I have my total of 9 buttons, 3 by 3. Next, down here, I want to have a reset button. So what I'll do is I'll just drag a regular button over like this. I'll position it to about, well, let's say about half the size of one of my game buttons, approximately. Something like this is good. Move it over here. Now this button over here, I want that to say reset. So over here in the text property, type in reset. That font is too small. So I need to change the font size to something a little bit bigger. So I'll go over here to the font property and let's change that size from 7.8. Let's see what 16 looks like. Alright, that looks pretty good. So I changed the size of the font to 16 and that looks okay. Now down here what I want is I want a label that says moves. And then I want another label over here that has the number 0 because I don't have any moves yet. But as I click these buttons, the moves counter will increase 1 by 1. So first, let me just go ahead and take a regular label over here, drag and drop it over here. The text property will be moves. Now that's, again, too small. the font is too small. So let me see what happens if I type in 12 points. That's okay. 12 points is all right. I'll move that over here. Approximately, like if I were to divide this button in half, this is a little bit over to this side. Then what I'll do is I'll take this label, copy and paste it, move it over here. Now this one, I want to make sure that it is auto size false. I want to have a border for this one, so I'll put fixed 3D. And then the text is going to have the number 0. Now you can see here that that 0 is over here on the far left hand side. I don't want that. That thing should be centered. So already it's top left align. I think I'll make it top center align by clicking this guy over here. So now you can see what you have over here. A label that has the number 0 in it. It's top center aligned. So you have something like this. Next, let me control the size of the form. So I'll reduce the size to something like this. I'm going to get rid of the minimize and the maximize box. So I'll make both of those false. And I'm going to change that form. It says form 1. I'm going to make that the word blackout. So I'll scroll down. And instead of form 1, we'll say blackout. Perfect. Let me save my work by clicking Save All. Okay, so I have my 9 game buttons. I have the reset button, and then I also have a label on the bottom that indicates how many moves it has taken me to solve the game. Well, the first thing that I want to do is I want to give names to the various items. So what this guy will be is BTN1, BTN2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So let me start off with the names. So over here, I'll say this is BTN1. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that BTN right there, Control C. And then I'll just paste BTN and type in the number 2. I'll do the same thing for all these guys. This is going to be BTN3. This is BTN4. BTN5. BTN6. BTN7, 8, and then finally BTN9. Let me just double check my work. BTN1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Perfect. Well, now that I have my game buttons labeled, I can go ahead and assign a name to the reset button, and that will be BTN reset. Okay, so this button, we're going to call that BTN reset. We should also give a name to this label over here because that is going to change from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, so forth and so on. So we want to give a name to that. Let's call this guy LBL moves. So LBL moves will be the label for this item. Make sure that you click Save All to save your work. Okay, so that takes care of the graphical user interface. Now let's work on the code. So what we want to do is every time we start our program, we want it to randomly display either white or red buttons. We don't want all red, we don't want all white. If I win the game like I have right here, everything is red, so then we want all the buttons to freeze, and the only way that we can start a new game is to click the reset button. Clicking the reset button will enable all the buttons, and it'll also change this move counter back to 0. Okay. So there's a couple of subs here that we got to work on first to make sure that we've got things in gear. So I think what I'll do is I'll just simply double click on the reset button, so it takes me into the code area. I no longer need the toolbox, and I no longer need the properties. So here I am inside of the reset, but I think what I want you to do is to hit enter a couple times here. So you see that I'm before the end class and after the end sub. Let's create some of the different subs to help us with our program. If you win the game, then all of these game buttons should be disabled. So we'll type in sub, disable, buttons, open and close parens. What this sub should do is make BTN1 through BTN9 disabled. And the way that you'll do that is BTN1 dot enabled, and we'll assign that to the value false. So this one disables button 1. Now we need to do the same thing for buttons 2 through 9. So what I'll do is I'll save myself some typing by copying this, Control C, paste 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now obviously I have to change those BTN1s to 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth and so on. So let me show you a fast way of doing that. You'll notice down here on the bottom of your Visual Studio screen you see the letters INS, which is an abbreviation for insert. If you double click that, it turns into the letters OVR, which stands for overwrite. In the overwrite mode, you can overwrite that number 1, 2, 3, 4, so forth and so on. So watch this. So I type in 2, it overwrites it. Down arrow, left arrow, 3. Down arrow, left arrow, 4. And then when you get really good at it, you can just simply go across like that. So this is going to overwrite when you are in this mode down here, the overwrite mode. Now I don't want to stay in this overwrite mode. I need to get back to the insert mode. So this thing that says OVR, I now need to double click it so that I can return back to the insert mode. And you'll even notice the difference of your cursor. It changes a little bit. And now it's just like a blinking I-beam. Whereas if this is in the overwrite mode, this is like a blinking box. So let's go ahead and double click this guy. We are back in the insert mode. For those of you who have a Windows laptop, you'll see an INS button on your keyboard. So that's what that is for. It's a toggle between insert and overwrite mode. Okay, so this guy is responsible for disabling all the game buttons. What I'm going to do now is have you press enter a couple times here after that end sub before this end class. And now we want to create an enabled buttons sub. So I'll type in the word sub, enable buttons, put a capital B there, open and close parentheses. All right, so for the enabled buttons sub, obviously we're going to set the enabled property to true. So I think what I'll do is I'll just take all of this and copy it over here. I need to change, though, these words that say false, I need to change them to true. So I'll type in true for one of these, then copy, and just double click paste for all of these to change those from false to true. And I'll save my work. So now I have a sub that is responsible for enabling all of the buttons. Okay, here's another thing that we need to consider. If we are going to change the color of a button that was selected, we're going to have to swap its color from red to white or from white to red. So let me create a sub that does that. Place your cursor over here, hit enter a couple of times. Again, it has to be inside of this end class and not necessarily inside of a sub. So right here at the very bottom, this is a good way for me to type in sub swap. Now, swap, after I press enter here, is going to require something. See, it's going to require a button. If I send it a button, I want it to take the color. If it's red, make it white. If it's white, make it red. So over here inside of the parentheses, I need to give this thing something. So I want you to type in by ref button 1 as button. Okay, so I just created a button over here called button 1. You send me a button, which in this routine, I'm going to call it button 1. You send me a button, and I'm going to change its color from red to white or white to red. Notice that I sent this by reference. That means that you are sending the original. By ref or by reference means send me the original. If this said by val, that means send me a copy. Well, I don't want to send a copy because then only the copy would be changed. I want to send it this original button or this original button because it's that original button that I need the color to be swapped. So that's why I say by reference. Okay, so what are we supposed to do? Well, if the button that you just gave me, right, here's the button that you just gave me, button 1. If the button's back color is the same thing as color.red, if that's true, then, all right, so here is a way to determine if whether or not the background color is red. And I use the equals function that will allow me to say, hey, the back color for this button, are you red? Because if that's the case, I need to make you white. So we'll say button 1 dot back color, and we'll change this to color dot white. So we're changing the button 1 back color to color dot white. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to put assignment operator. Sorry about that. Color dot white. Here we go. We'll change that to white. Now that's if the button is actually red. But if it's white, then we need to change it to red. So I'll just simply put an else statement over here and say button 1 dot back color, you are going to be assigned the red color. So this is a cool little sub that if I send it a button, which temporarily I'm calling the button that you sent to me, I'm going to call it button 1. If the button that you sent to me is red, make it now white. If it's not red, that means that it's white, so therefore I'm going to make it red. So this if statement will swap the color of any button that's sent to this procedure. Okay, so it looks like we have the ability to disable, to enable, to swap the color. Let's perform a game setup. Don't run the program. Let me run the program for you. As you can see here, when I run the program, everything is red, but that's not how our program is supposed to work. When I open the program, these are supposed to be randomized to some different color. When I click the reset button, again, that's supposed to randomize these. So it looks like I need to create a sub called game setup that does a couple of things. Number one, we're going to create random buttons, either white or red, and we're going to set this thing to 0. So how do I do that? Well, let's go to the bottom of our code, hit enter a couple times so you have the scenario here where you are before end class, but you are after any end sub, so that we can create a new sub. The name of this sub is going to be game setup. Now what game setup does is to randomize those buttons. Well, anytime you want to randomize something, you're going to need a random number generator. So let's create one. Dim, we'll call it my random. As new random, open and close parentheses. Now we're not done here. This is like the beginning part of creating a random number generator. Now I want to make sure that your seed value and my seed value for the random numbers that are being generated are different. Right now our random numbers are pretty much the same because this is going to look at a lookup table and give me those numbers from the lookup table. Well, that's not very random. So what you can do is to enhance the randomness of your random number generator is to place your cursor in here and to type system.datetime.now.millisecond. Now what this does is it generates the number of milliseconds that have elapsed from January 1st, 1970 to now. Because the likelihood of your clock, right, so here's my clock over here on the top of my Macintosh computer, and I think for Windows it typically is down here somewhere. Your system clock is probably not the same thing as my system clock. We're probably off by a second or two, maybe some milliseconds. But at the moment that you start this program, at the moment that this sub is called, it's highly unlikely. that your time and my time are going to be exactly the same. So what this does is it just enhances that ability of generating random numbers. Okay, so you don't have to remember all that. You just have to remember, hey, this is the line that I have to type if I want to create a random number generator. Okay. All right. So what we'll do is this: if my rand dot next, see what next does is it creates a random number. Now the random number that we want to create is a range of numbers. For example, if I said flip a coin, then you would have heads or tails. Well, what if I gave you numbers? So let's let 0 represent heads and 1 represent tails. How about this? How about we let 0 represent red and 1 represent white? Okay. So I need to generate a random number between 0 and 1. All right. So what I'm going to do is place a parentheses here. And the flavor or the version that we're going to use is this third version. You don't have to click this. This is information. And so what this is saying is that next comes in 3 different flavors. Well, it's this third flavor where I give you a min value and a max value so that you can choose a range of values, which we just want 0 and 1. All right, I want you to notice this keyword over here, the inclusive lower bound of a random number return. You know, so my son, who's in junior high school, he says, you know, Dad, some of these girls are really exclusive, right? They don't let you in their circle of friendship. And then he says these other girls, they're very inclusive, right? They're welcoming, they're friendly. And so, you know, we understand that term inclusive and exclusive, right? Same thing here. So if I say from 0, comma, oh, look at that word. What does that word say? Exclusive. So if I put the number 2 there, what this is saying is include 0, but do not include 2. So therefore, you tell me what numbers are we what numbers are we generating in this range from 0 to 1, right? How about this? 1, and I type in 7. What numbers am I generating here? From 1 to 6. Very good, because the second number is exclusive. The first number is inclusive. So if you were to throw dice, right, you need to generate 1 through 6. This is what you would have to type, right? But we want just a 0 or a 1. So a 0 or a 1, this is what I would have to type, because that 2 is exclusive. This is basically saying generate a number from 0 rather, and less than 2. And if this thing is equal to 0, then press return. Generate a random number 0 or 1. Now, if it's 0, see this? If it's 0, then change button 1's back color to color.red. Otherwise, change button 1's back color to color.white. So now I have a cool little chunk of code that says generate a random number. I don't know, what, heads or tails, but instead of heads or tails, we're going to say 0 or 1. The 0 represents red, the 1 represents white. If this thing came up randomly 0, then your button 1's color is going to be red. If this thing came up 1, then your button 1's back color is going to be white. Well, I have to do the same thing for BTN 2, 3, 4, all the way to 9. I don't want to type all this code. So I'm just going to copy and paste. And then I'll use that overwrite method that I showed you before to change BTN 1 to BTN 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth and so on. So I'm going to take this code right here, and I'm going to copy and paste it. So let me go from here to here, Control C, enter, enter, and this is going to be for BTN 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and finally 9. Now I got to go back and I've got to change all these numbers. So let me go back to the top over here. And this is BTN 1 and 1. This is supposed to be BTN 2 and 2. So what I'll do is down here where it says Insert, I'm going to double click this to change this to the overwrite mode, OVR. Now that I'm in the overwrite mode, I can click over here and type in the number 2. Let me scroll down. Change this to 3 and 3. Or I could use the arrows as well on my keyboard. And I'm trying to be very careful to change these numbers only and not accidentally overwrite something else. It's not a big deal, I can fix it, but I think I'm just trying to be as accurate as possible. And then finally 9 and 9. Okay, let me get out of this overwrite mode. So over here where it says OVR, I'm going to double click it and change it back to this insert mode. So what I've done now is for all 9 buttons, I've said generate a random number. If that random number is 0, make that button's back color red. If it's 1, make that back color for that particular button white. And I'm doing this for all the buttons. Okay, well, the last thing to do is to make sure, remember, what are we doing? We are setting up the game, right? We're setting up the game. Well, in order to set up the game properly, I also have to change this guy to 0. So back over here at the bottom of our code, I'll say moves counter. Well, actually, before I do that, I have a variable, or I have a label over here, but I don't have a variable that I can assign to this label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way to the top. And after form 1, hit enter a couple times so that your cursor looks just like mine. I need to declare a global variable. The name of the global variable is going to be moves counter. It's going to be an integer, and I'll set you equal to 0 at first. So the reason why I say this is global is because this thing does not belong to any given procedure. Now don't do this. Let me just give you a demonstration. If I were to cut this and put it over here, okay, so now this thing is local. This is local to this guy. In other words, it belongs to this btn reset click procedure. But by moving it out here, that means that this thing is global. This guy can see it. This guy can see it. All of the subs and functions can see this moves counter because why? It's not declared in any function or sub. Therefore, it is global. Everyone can see this. Okay, so now that you have the moves counter variable declared, we can go back over here to the game setup, and at the very bottom, I can say moves counter. We're going to set that to 0 because remember, you just clicked the game setup function, or the reset button, which is going to eventually call this function. Well, then the next thing to do is to say lbl moves.text convert dot to string whatever moves counter is. Okay, so now you have a function, or a sub rather, which is a procedure that doesn't return anything, called game setup. You call this thing, what does it do? It's going to change this to white or red, this to white or red. It'll change all of these to white or red randomly, and it'll change this guy over here back to 0. So that's cool. I can call upon that to do that work. Now, hit enter a couple times, and so I want your screen to look like this, where the cursor is blinking just before the end class, but outside of any end sub, or outside of any sub. And there's another sub that we need to consider, and that is what happens if you win. Don't do this. Let me run the program. If I run the program, if I win, like if I click a button and then all of them are red or all of them are white, well then all of these buttons need to be disabled. And then the only way for me to play a brand new game is to click reset. But what is the definition of winning? Well, the definition of winning is when all of the buttons are the same color. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to compare everything to button 1. If everything is the same as button 1, then I know that I've won. So, is button 2 the same color as button 1? Is button 3's color the same thing as button 1? Same question of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm comparing everything to button 1. If the comparison of all the buttons to button 1 is that they are all the same color, then I've won. Right? So it doesn't matter if they're all red or if they're all white. Everything is being compared to button 1. So let me stop the program. So over here, I'm going to create a new procedure. The procedure is going to be called check for win. Did we win? That's what this sub is going to check to see if you've won. Okay, so if BTN1's back color is the same as BTN2's back color, so let me stop right here. That's the first thing that I'm checking, but I have to continue from here. So I use the AND, remember the logical AND operator says if this is true, and if this is true, and if this is true, so if BTN1 and BTN2 are the same, and if BTN1 and 3 are the same, and if BTN1 and 4 are the same, and all the way through 9. So if BTN1's back color is the same thing as BTN3's back color, and so forth and so on. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some copying and pasting. So I'll just copy this space right here, include the AND, include this, and then I'm going to change some numbers. So copy, and I'll double click that word AND. So that's going to be for, that's 3, this is going to be for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If all of that is true, then press enter. Okay, so I have to change some numbers, right? Here I'm comparing BTN1 and 2. Here I'm comparing BTN1 and 3. Here I need to compare BTN1 and 4. So I'm going to go back over here to this insert button, double click to make that overwrite, and here I need to compare 1 and 4. So let me type a 4 here. Here I need to compare 1 and 5. I need to compare 1 and 6, 1 and 7, 1 and 8, and then finally compare 1 and 9. And now I'm going to remove this overwrite function here by double clicking it. So now we're back into the insert mode. So in essence what we're doing is we're saying if all of the button colors are the same, then what do you want to do? Disable all the buttons because you've won. So I'm going to disable all the buttons. The only way you can play a new game now is to click the reset button. Okay, so I think I've got everything that I need. I've got a game set up. I've got the ability to check for when I can swap, I can enable and disable buttons. Let's do this now. Let's go back over here and double click the reset button so that I can go back into this particular procedure. So I double click reset and now I'm over here. Well, now with the functions, when I click the reset button, what do I want to do? Well, first of all, I want to enable all of the buttons. Step 1. Next, call the game setup function or sub so that it can set up everything. Randomize the colors, change the counter to 0. I could set the moves counter to 0 and then therefore the label moves is going to be convert dot to string, whatever the moves counter is. I think this is a little redundant because I think I already did that in game setup. Let me double check here. Game setup, yep. So game setup, I randomize all the buttons and look at what I did. Set the moves counter to 0 and then change that to a string and then place that into the text property of the LBL moves label. So I don't have to do this. This is already taken care of in game setup. So I can just leave it like that. All right, so if I click this button, I click that button, this should happen. Let's see. Run the program. Okay, so everything's still coming up red. Let's see what happens when I click reset. Ah, sweet. Let me try it again, and again, and again, so forth and so on. So what you should notice is that every one of these buttons has been randomized. So let me just kind of take a look. Is there any one button that's just staying still, one color? Nope. Looks like they're all being, at one time or another, they're being randomized. All right, so that's cool. We have the ability to randomize these colors. But here's the problem. Let me stop the program and start it again. I want randomization to take place right here at the beginning of our program. Let me close the program. So if you want that feature, then what you need to do is to double click on this title bar area, and that's going to take you into the form load function. So back over here, first of all, make sure your program is not running. You have to see right now we're in the running mode. So I'm going to quit this. I am no longer in the running mode. Let me double click the title bar. When I do that, notice where it takes me, into the form load sub. This is the sub that runs when you first start your program. It would be as if I said, everyone, let's go to the track and field. All right, before we start racing, let's get ready. Let's set up, okay? So some of you are tying your shoes. Some of you are tightening the string around your shorts. Some of you are taking maybe a little sip of water. All right, stretching out your legs and your neck. Ready? Go. Okay, so before we do any of that stuff, we set up. That's what form load is. It's the first thing that's called before anything is displayed to the screen. Well, what do I want to do when I first load the program? I can just simply call game setup, and I can enable all the buttons. So when I first run my program, I'm going to enable all the buttons, I'm going to call game setup, and now we're ready to go. So run the program. Look at that. It randomly came up with this. I bet you your random buttons are not the same as mine, probably a little different. Let me stop the program, run it again. Okay, so here's a different pattern. Let me stop the program, run it again, and yet a different pattern, so forth and so on. If I click reset, right, that also should change the buttons. Good, looks good. Now, here's the thing that we don't have yet. If I click on a button, nothing changes. We want those changes based on the buttons that we select. Okay, so I'll stop the program. Let me go back over here to the design. Now, depending on the button that's clicked, that will determine which other buttons change its color. For example, here's BTN1. I think you'll agree. If I click BTN1, we also want BTN2 and BTN4 to swap its color. So I'm going to write a comment down. BTN1, 2, and 4. So let me double click this guy. 1, 2, and 4. I have a little comment there. Those are the buttons that need to swap when I click BTN1. Let me do this again. When I click this, do you agree that this button needs to swap, this one, and this one? So what is that? 1, 2, not 3, and 4. So 1, 2, and 4 need to be swapped. That's why I put a 1, 2, 4 here to tell me to do the following. Swap BTN1, swap BTN2, swap BTN4. That's why I wrote my little comment up here to remind me these are the 3 buttons that need to be swapped. Once those buttons are swapped, what's the next thing to consider? Well, remember, if you are clicking one of these buttons, then the moves counter needs to increment by 1 because you clicked a button. So what we're going to do is we're going to say moves counter is going to be moves counter plus 1. Increment the value of moves counter. Once you've done that, let's output that to the moves counter label. Convert to string whatever moves counter is. All right, so now every button that you click, the moves counter increments by 1. But here's another thing. We also need to consider, have we won the game? Because it is possible that when I click this button, and maybe like all these guys are white, 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 and these are red. Well, when I click this button, this is going to go to white, white, and white. So when I click this, everything is white, so therefore I've won. So when I click a button, I need to check to see if I've won. Well, that's what we did. We created a check for win sub. The check for win sub says, is button 1 the same thing as this? Or is button 2 the same thing as button 1? How about button 3, and button 4 and 1, 5 and 1, 6 and 1, 7 and 1, 8 and 1, 9 and 1? Because if they're all the same color, then remember, disable all the buttons, and the only way to play a new game is to click reset. So these are the things that I need to do. Let me just run the program just to see what happens right now. So it randomly changes the buttons. Watch this. Oh, isn't that sweet? Look at that. Now that's the only button so far that I've got, right? These others I have to still code. But for this button, notice what it does. Let me click reset here. Oh, look at this. Okay, so this is red, white, and red. So now that means this goes to white, white, and red. Now this is going to go to red, red. That's going to go to white. So that's pretty cool. That's what we need to do for the rest of the buttons. Okay, so let me close the program. Go back over here. Let's go back to the design view. And now let's work with this guy over here, BTN2. So let's think about this. What buttons need to be swapped when I click BTN2? Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, and 5. Right? So 1, 2, 3, and BTN5 need to be swapped. So double click over here. 1, 2, 3, and 5 need to be swapped when I click this button right here. Okay. Well, really that's just the same thing as this code over here, except I got to add an extra swap item. So I think I'll just simply take this, copy and paste it, and put it over here. And it looks like BTN1, BTN2. Let me change that to a BTN3, and then I'll just simply add a swap BTN5, right? Because that's what I need to swap. 1, 2, 3, and 5. 1, 2, 3, and 5. Everything else is going to stay the same in that I'm going to increment the moves counter. I'm going to update the label with that moves counter value, and then I'm going to check for win. Did I win? Because if I did, disable all the buttons. Now let's go back over here and consider what happens when the user clicks BTN3. Okay, so if BTN3 is clicked, then we need to change 2, 3, and 6. 2, 3, and 6. So 2, 3, and 6. Well, I'll just take this code over here, copy and paste it, and change this to BTN2, 3, and 6. And again, the rest of the code stays the same. Let's go back over here and consider what happens when the user clicks this button, BTN4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 4, 5, and 7. 1, 4, 5, and 7. So 1, 4, 5, and 7 need to be swapped. I'll just take this guy over here since it has 4 swapping statements. Paste it over here and change these numbers. 1, 4, 5, and 7. And that takes care of BTN4. Now this one over here, BTN5, that's a big one. 5 swaps need to take place. This one on the top, these 3, and then this one on the bottom. So what is that? 2, 4, 5, 6, 8. 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8 need to be swapped. I'll just take this guy over here, copy, and paste it. And let's see here. So that's going to be 2, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll add a new swap statement, BTN8. So 2, 4, 5, 6, 8. 2, 4, 5, 6, 8. And then, of course, the rest of the code is the same. All right, that was BTN5. So now I have to consider BTN6. Well, it looks like 3, 5, 6, and 9. So 3, 5, 6, 9. 3, 5, 6, 9 need to be swapped. So I'm just going to copy and paste And over here, I'll change that to 3, 5, 6, and 9. That was for BTN6. Go back over here, save my work. Now let's consider this button over here. Well, it looks like BTN4, 7, and 8. 4, 7, and 8 need to be swapped. So 4, 7, and 8 when I click BTN7. Alright, so let me just change this to 4, 7, and 8. I don't need this extra swap, so I'm going to get rid of it. BTN4, 7, and 8 must be swapped when I click BTN7. Save my work and go back over here. Now let's consider BTN8. Looks like BTN 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. 5, 7, 8, 9 when I click this guy. So 5, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to paste the code and then I'll change these to 5, 7, 8, and 9. Save my work. And then finally I have this last button over here. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9. So 6, 8, and 9. Paste my code. One of these swap functions I'm not going to need. I need 6, 8, and 9. Okay, so over here, 6, 8, and 9. 6, 8, 9. All right, so I've generated the code for all these buttons. Now let's see what happens. I got to do a test, so I'm going to start the program. First of all, everything comes up randomly. That's great. I need to test all of these, so I'm just going to click each button once. So if I click this, did the appropriate swaps take place? Yep. How about this one? Yep. Over here, yep, these 3 are changing. How about this guy over here? These 4 should change. Yep, good. 5 buttons should change. Yeah, that's right. Over here, these 2 and the one over here and the one that I'm clicking. Yeah, that's good. Over here, just these 3 right here. Good. Now these 4. Yep, and then finally these 3 over here. Perfect. And the moves counter is incrementing every time I click this. Good. So now let me solve the puzzle and see if it will terminate. So over here, let's see if I can get symmetry here. Okay, so I've solved the puzzle. Notice now that if I click a button, nothing happens. So that's perfect. I want to disable the game. I've won the game. It took me 37 moves. The only way that I can start a new game is to click reset. So I click reset, that went to 0, and it randomized the puzzle. Perfect. So let me try to solve this one. Okay, as soon as I click this, it's going to solve it. 5 moves. Let me see what happens. Perfect. All these buttons are disabled. Let me click reset again, and again, and again, and again, and again, so forth and so on. So I can try any of these puzzles. So I'll try this guy over here, see if I can get it. And let's see here. This one's a little bit more tricky here, but I think I got it. Okay, so that took me 19 moves. Let me see. Yep, everything is disabled. So the only way that I get to start a new game is to click the reset button. And that's it. All right, so this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.